Hey y'all, welcome back to the Bluebonnet Cosplay YouTube channel. My name is Astin, aka Blue, and today we will be styling Muichiro Tokitou from Demon Slayer. The wig that I'll be using for this project is Epic Cosplay Wigs NYX Style in Anime Blue Mix, and I'm just dipping that in a mixture of RIT dye. I used about half the bottle for this project, and a little bit of dish soap. I'm using the stovetop method, and for this method it is very important that you use a pot that you are not going to be using for cooking, because the RIT dye, any fabric dye really, can leave behind harmful toxins and chemicals that you really don't want in your food. After about 15 to 20 minutes of dipping the wig up and down into the water to make sure I have a nice smooth gradient effect from black to blue, I'm just rinsing it in cold water until I see the water running clear. From there, I personally like to make what I call a wig burrito, where I wrap the wig nice and tight in an old towel that I don't care about anymore, and apply a lot of pressure to make sure I get as much of the water out as I can. Once I've got the wig mostly wrung out in the towel, I'm going to put it back on my wig head, which is sized to my head, and I'm going to align the ears where they need to be and pin everything in place. Personally, I like to put one pin on either side of the wig where it hangs down in front of your ears, and one on the top at the part line. Once the wig is secured, I will comb it out and make sure there's no harsh tangles by the time it dries. Alright, this is my favorite part, crimping. The way I crimp my wigs is I set my crimper to 220 degrees because that's what I know my wigs can usually handle. Grab a small section of hair and I tap the crimper all the way down the length of the weft. And while it's still hot, I take my teasing comb, which is a super fine-toothed comb that does have some wider teeth as well, and I brush it out. Again, that's while it's still hot. I'll admit, I went a little heavy on the crimping on this one. I really shouldn't have done it that much. It was way too fluffy. But after I was done crimping, I ended up going over it with a flat iron again, and that flattened it out nicely. Now that I've sectioned off another piece of hair, I'm going to do the process all over again. Make sure there's no tangles. Tap the crimper all the way down the length of the weft. If your crimp marks are too harsh, you can also use the crimper as a straightener. Reheat the hair right before you brush it, and that'll soften some of the crimp marks. And finally, we brush through it while it's still hot. I like to brush through all of my sections as well to really try to blend them together. I like to crimp my wigs for a number of reasons. The main reason is to add texture to it and make it easier to style because it grips itself better. The second reason is that it makes it less shiny. And the third reason is to help keep it from tangling as easily. Here I've separated out the bangs from the rest of the hair, and I'm going to start styling. Muichiro's hair gives me Yu-Gi-Oh vibes, so I used a similar technique to what I did with my Bakura wig. I'm using a combination of got-to-be-glued hairspray, teasing, blow drying, and steaming to mold the hair into the shape that I want. After I've got the shape that I want, I go back, trim the ends, and hairspray the entire shape. Here I'm demonstrating start to finish how I achieve a spike or a styled bangs look. My first step is always to coat the hair in got-to-be-glued hairspray and let it dry. This, along with the crimping, just adds some texture so that the hair can grip onto itself. From here, I split the hair into a couple of sections and I tease or backcomb the hair. Once that's all teased and backcombed, I go through and I very gently brush out just the topmost layer, just to make it smooth. From here, I'm going to grab my steamer and heat up the wig fibers. Synthetic wigs are made out of plastic, so if you heat them up, they become more malleable. When you cool them down, they stay in place. Before it cools completely, I'm going to take my hands and basically mold it like clay into the shape that I want while blow drying it with a cool setting. This is not only going to cool the wig and make it stay in place better, but it's also going to dry that hairspray. Once I'm happy with the general shape, I'll go ahead and cut that to a little bit longer than the length that I want. Here I'm using upward scissor cuts to make sure that the ends aren't too blunt. From here, all I'm going to do is keep molding the hair into place and trimming until I'm happy with it. When it comes to these awkward side pieces of hair, I didn't really know where to start, so I ended up taking inspiration from all the Amazon listings that I found that used ponytails. This was a new technique for me entirely, so I had not done this before my Muichiro wig. Here I'm spraying on generous amounts of RV and vehicle silicone lubricant before combing it through to coat all of the fibers. What this is going to do is keep the wig from tangling quite as much as it would without the silicone lubricant. It worked really well. I barely have to comb it. I can go through it with a wide-toothed comb by the time I'm done wearing it, and the knots loosen themselves up pretty easily. A few things to note about this method. The silicone lubricant does make the wig a little bit shinier than I personally enjoy. But for Muichiro, I think it worked pretty well. I know for sure some of my other wigs are going to get this makeover treatment as well. Make sure that you do this in a well-ventilated area. As you can see, I'm outside trying to do this mostly with the wind blowing away from me. The chemical smell from this is extremely strong, although it does fade pretty quickly. I left it outside for about 24 hours before I wore it, and I could not smell a thing after that. I did 2 passes of this, so I did this one that I filmed here, and then the next day after it had dried and all that, I took it out, brushed it through again, and did another very generous coat, and that worked like a charm. I would personally say with this method, you don't need to crimp the wig to prevent tangles. That's only if you like the texture of a crimped wig, which I personally do.